deathmatch. Someone has to die.
This movie begins in a terrifying prison where the police officers were no less ruthless than the mafia. Inmates there were forced into horrific fighting rings, often leading to their deaths. But even this wasn't enough to satisfy the officers. Behind all this was the prison warden, who orchestrated these brutal fights to entertain the wealthy and run a gambling operation. The only rule of these horrifying fights was to completely finish off your opponent and win the game yourself. You couldn't win until you killed your opponent. Meanwhile, we see a man named Burke bringing his son home from school. When his wife, Mary, talks to their son, she notices a bruise on his cheek. Angrily, she asks Burke about it, but he lies, saying it was just a minor squabble among kids. Hearing this, Mary becomes furious. She angrily storms out. Afterward, we see Burke go to meet his friend Steve, who is an FBI agent. We learn that Burke also used to work with Steve, but he was expelled from the Special Forces 2 years ago for some reason. Steve now offers Burke a job. He tells him he needs to take charge of that very prison where these horrific activities are taking place. He explains that there are incredibly dangerous officers there who are engaged in deadly games with inmates. And in just the past 4 weeks, 8 dead bodies have been brought out. Although the FBI has repeatedly threatened the warden after seeing this, the warden has cunningly covered everything up. The FBI suspected the warden was behind all this because he made the inmates dance to his tune, and all the guards there followed his every order like slaves. So Steve gives Burke this responsibility. If Burke can do this,
you and I will be partners again, only this time with the FBI.
Furthermore, his son will even receive a college scholarship for his future education. Saying this, he tells Burke to go home and think about it. Burke returns home and thinks for a long time, but he can't make a decision. However, considering his son's future, he finally calls Steve the next morning and tells him he's fully ready for the mission, so he won't be able to meet them. After that, he quickly meets Steve in front of the police station, and Steve explains the entire plan. Steve tells him, quickly cause a disturbance here and get the attention of the police at all costs. So without wasting time, he quickly goes in front of the police station and tries to attack a police officer and steal his car. Soon, many police cars start following him, and at one point, he gets caught. When his case is brought to court, he is found guilty of stealing a police car and assaulting a police officer. He is sentenced to 2 years in prison and is subsequently sent to the very prison where all these illicit activities were happening. Afterward, Burke and the other new inmates are lined up because the warden is going to speak with them for the first time. The warden soon arrives and, with his terrifying voice, tells them all that he is the boss of this prison. If anyone doesn't follow his orders, they will be given such a severe punishment that they will never forget it in their lives. After all these lessons are completed, Burke and his companions are sent to their respective cells. Later that night, we see the warden watching a fight. In this horrific fight, an inmate dies right there. But seeing all this doesn't affect the warden at all. When his assistant comes to talk to him, he tells him about a man named Burke who has come to the prison as a new inmate. He used to be in the Special Forces. When the warden hears all this, he becomes very happy and tells his assistant to make sure that Burke is in the fight ring the next day. The next morning, Burke and all the inmates are brought to the gym area. As they prepare for the fights, he befriends Riley. Then he meets a man named Tommy. A little later, Burke sees some bad inmates trying to harass an inmate named Ari for no reason. So he tries to stop them, which leads to an argument. But Burke yells at them and finally sends them away. A little later, we see Burke being called by the warden's assistant to meet him. As he was going to meet him, those 2 men who were harassing the boy earlier were brought in front of him in an empty area. But we see that when the fight begins between them, Burke, without any hindrance, easily beats both of them badly. Afterward, Burke is taken to meet the warden. The warden offers him, saying, "I want to make you my best fighter, but to be this, you have to follow all my orders." Just then, Burke's wife, Mary, comes to meet him, and when she sees her husband in jail, she asks him how he ended up in jail. But since Burke can't tell her the whole truth now, he tells her not to worry and also warns her not to come to meet him there again. Later that night, we see the warden talking on the phone with his partner. Actually, the warden had a deal with this man because the horrific fights from the warden's prison were shown on his online streaming platform, and they earned money through various ways, a share of which the warden also received. The warden then tells him about Burke and gives him an idea about his power. Hearing this, the man says,
I like it. I like it a lot.
Because they knew very well that if Burke fought, they could earn millions of dollars overnight. Afterward, all of the warden's associates quickly come to take Burke. Soon, with a black hood over his head, he is brought to the place where this terrifying fight will happen. As soon as he is brought here, we see Burke's opponent start attacking him, and Burke, for his own protection, starts counterattacking, and the warden's partner is watching this fight with girls, having a lot of fun. Very soon, we see Burke show his power and beat his opponent badly, crushing his bones and flesh, and finally killing him there, meaning he finally wins this match by showing his power. After the fight, the warden comes to meet Burke and praises him.
One warrior can always spot another.
But we see Burke directly refuses him, saying, "I never want to be part of those fights where the opponent has to be killed."
But I do know where this is going, and I'm done.
But the warden wasn't listening to anything he said. Instead, he threatens him.
You're done when I say you're done.
After returning to his cell from there, Burke writes down everything he learned on a piece of paper and hides it inside an old book. A little later, we see an old man giving books to everyone. Burke also takes a new book from him and asks him to take the old book to the library. And that old man, without knowing anything, takes that book straight to the library. And here, Steve's people quickly take that book from the old man. And very soon, the letter written by Burke reaches Steve's hands, and Steve clearly understands what is actually happening inside the jail. Then the next morning, as Burke was chatting with his new friends, Riley and Tommy, Riley noticed many marks of beating on Burke's face. And seeing this, he clearly understood that he was also being forcibly made a part of those fights. So when they were all eating in the canteen, a terrifying man like a mountain. Actually, this man's name was Milton, whom everyone knew as the president because he was very dangerous and had superhuman strength, with which he could easily defeat anyone. However, since Ari was a little more afraid, he accidentally messed up his food. Because of this, Milton got very angry, and he grabbed Ari and decided to beat him up. But then Burke intervened and advised him to calm down. But hearing this, Milton got even more fired up instead of calming down. However, before the matter escalated further, Tommy intervened and told Milton,
He's a new guy, and he doesn't understand how things work.
Later that night, the warden's men grab Burke and bring him back for another fight. But this time, Burke didn't want to fight at all. So the warden threatens him by showing him a picture of his wife and son. And he tells him, "If you don't follow my orders and fight, it won't be good for your wife and son at all." And because of this, Burke finally has to agree to fight. When he goes to fight, we see that today his opponent is a terrifying Chinese fighter. And this fight was a very difficult one for him. This Chinese man had beaten him to a pulp, but finally, with great difficulty, Burke wins this fight at the last moment. After the fight, when he was returning to his cell, the warden meets him once again, and again shows him his family's picture and says,
You keep fighting, and you'll have nothing to worry about. Your family will be safe.
But hearing this, Burke becomes extremely angry because he is being blackmailed repeatedly and forced to commit all these heinous acts. He is being made to kill people. Meanwhile, Mary calls Steve and asks why Burke was sent to jail. What crime did he commit? And since she was very worried about Burke, she also starts crying. And seeing all this, Steve also couldn't understand anything. So he promises her,
Don't worry, okay? I'm gonna take care of everything.
The next morning, as Burke was working out with other inmates in the gym area, Ari suddenly falls to the ground. Actually, Milton had stabbed him in the stomach. He still hadn't forgotten that incident from that day. Because of this, Burke gets very angry and starts challenging him to a fight. Later that night, the warden sends a beautiful girl to Burke's cell as a reward because Burke's fights brought him a lot of profit. However, since Burke loved his wife very much, he directly refused the girl. Later that night, Burke again writes something on a paper and hides it inside a book. And when that old man comes again, he asks him to take it to the library. But this time, the man named Tommy secretly sees everything. And a little later, the guards come here and they take Riley out of his cell. Actually, Riley has been taken to fight, and today his fight partner is that terrifying fighter named Milton. And when the fight starts between them, Riley is no match for Milton at all. And very soon, Milton beats him badly and subsequently gives him a terrible death. The next morning, when Burke wakes up, he sees that Riley is not coming in front of him. Riley is nowhere to be found. So when he goes to the gym area and asks the others, he learns that Riley suffered a terrible death in last night's fight. Hearing this, he is deeply hurt. A little later, two guards grab Burke and bring him in front of his cell, where the warden was already waiting for him. The warden had actually found the paper that was being sent to the library through the old man, and he asks him,
Who are you waiting for?
But Burke doesn't answer at all. Instead, he smiles slightly. Because of this, those policemen take him to an empty room on the side to interrogate him. And we see another guard goes and shoots and kills that old man. And then we see the warden and his companions mercilessly torturing Burke. They repeatedly gave him electric shocks, which Burke could not bear at all. But before he says anything, he questions the warden.
How'd you find out about the book?
Just then, Tommy comes in front of him and says,
I'm sorry, Burke.
Tommy thought that if he told the warden about this paper, he would be happy with him.
Can I go now?
But the warden was actually terribly evil. He instead... Meanwhile, Steve couldn't contact Burke at all, So he comes to meet Mary, and he tells Mary everything about Burke. He tells her why Burke went to jail. He says that Burke didn't commit any crime. He went to jail for a secret FBI mission. And he went to this jail to give you and your child a beautiful future. Now for Mary and her son's safety, Steve plans to take them to another safe place. But by the time Mary packed all her things and was leaving, the warden's entire gang arrived, and they hold them at gunpoint and take them away. They also shoot Steve, but fortunately, since Steve was wearing a bulletproof jacket, he somehow survives, and quickly calls the FBI office to order the arrest of the warden and his entire gang. Meanwhile, the warden's gang brings Mary and her son to the warden, so that the warden can blackmail Burke through them and find out the name of his boss. And then, both of them are forcibly brought to that fighting arena where Burke and Milton's terrifying fight is forced upon them to watch. And then we see that when Burke sees from inside the ring that his son and wife are already captives of the warden, he is completely stunned. A little later, we see the fight begins between them. But Burke keeps thinking that if he wants to save his son and his wife from the warden's hands, he has to win this fight at all costs. And he slowly starts defeating Milton with the help of his fighting skills. But then the warden cunningly throws 2 baseball bats into their ring so that they can hit each other with these bats. However, we see that Burke uses his special forces training and finally finishes him off there. But at the very last moment, when he is about to finish Milton off completely, he remembers that his wife and son are watching this match. So he doesn't kill him further because he didn't want his son to grow up seeing him kill someone. But because of this, the warden gets extremely angry and he comes into the ring and instead attacks Burke. And he tells him,
"Deathmatch, Mr. Burke. We play to the end."
But by now, the FBI officers and Steve have surrounded the entire jail. And very soon, the FBI agents come into the middle of the jail and they start arresting all the officers one by one. And here, as Burke was forced to kill Milton, Steve arrives and shoots the warden's assistant. And seizing this opportunity, Burke also attacks the warden. And then he tells him, "You wanted to know about my boss, didn't you? Here my boss has arrived. Now what will you do?" And then very soon, an FBI officer also arrives here and they arrest the warden. Finally, since Burke has completed this mission for the FBI, he also gets a promotion and he gets his job back and he starts anew with his family so beautifully. And at the very end, we see the warden ends up as an inmate in the same jail where he was the warden, and very soon he will be sentenced to death. And at such a terrifying point, this entire movie ends here. Let me know in the comments how you liked the video. If you liked it, please give it a like. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do. We'll see you in another video. Take care.